and welcome to yet another edition of Fourth Estate here on ZTN Prime Channel 294. And on this show, as usual, we tackle all things media and journalism in Zimbabwe. My name is Tinomde Chakanyuka. I am your host, and today we are focusing on media regulation and ethics affecting journalistic practice in the country. And to dissect this topic, I am joined by Godwin Piri, the Executive Secretary of the Zimbabwe Media Commission. Welcome to the show, Godwin.
Thank you very much, Tino, and hello to our viewers.
Now, to start with, for the benefit of our viewers, can you briefly speak on the role that you play as the Zimbabwe Media Commission?
Okay, like you said briefly, Zimbabwe Media Commission is one of what are called Chapter 12 institutions in the Constitution of Zimbabwe. The wisdom of the constitution makers and the people of Zimbabwe was that Zimbabwe needed independent institutions that will help safeguard human rights, governance, democracy. So we have got 5 independent commissions. I'm sure everybody knows Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission,
Gender
Commission, and so on and so forth. Then you have the Zimbabwe Media Commission, whose broad mandate is, I would say, it's a twin mandate. Firstly, is to regulate the media industry in Zimbabwe, ensuring that the media is professional and that it basically delivers to the needs of the people of Zimbabwe. Secondly, we have an obligation to, as a human rights defender, and in that regard, we are there to ensure freedom of the media, freedom of expression, and access to certain information that Zimbabweans need as a right.
Now, you mentioned that you are an independent institution.
Yes.
Critics may argue otherwise. Maybe you may need to shed a bit more light on how independent exactly you are as an institution.
Well, as independent as we should be. Basically, we are accountable only to Parliament. It's basically even the way in which we operate. Yes, we get our budget, but we also do our own fundraising. And in our operations, we are not directed by anyone. We're directed only by our mandate, our strategic plan, by our own priorities. So we are really independent. We are not under the direction of any member of the executive, government officials, and so on and so forth. We are that independent.
Take us through some of the fundraising activities that you undertake to finance your operations.
Yes, like I said, the principal funding that we get comes from our fiscus. We do get, what like any other state institution. We also do fundraise from donors, like-minded institutions, of course, taking note that we need to maintain that independence. We need to ensure that we are not being controlled by people who give us money. So it's basically about fundraising around those critical areas where we think support can help us carry out the work that we should be doing.
Gordon, there's a common saying in journalism that he who pays the piper calls the tune. You mentioned that you get funding partly from fiscus. Are you not compromised? Is your independence not compromised given that you're getting funding from central government?
Well, funds from central government are national resources, and national institutions have a right to access national resources. So I have not experienced, at least in my time, I've not had any complaints even from people that I found there, to the extent that they would complain of government officials then using those resources to say, do this or do that, or if you don't do this, we'll do that. We have not experienced that. I think there's been a very professional relationship. The government officials understand that we have a mandate which is constitutional, and we are basically allowed to do the work that we want to do.
And your relationship with private funders, you mentioned that you also engage NGOs. Some of these have been seen to have political agendas. Haven't they really tried to push their agenda down your throat as a commission?
No. We are very conscious people. I think that's what I'll say. Our commissioners are very conscious. The management team is very conscious. We have a mandate. Ultimately, we are judged by the people of Zimbabwe through Parliament, and we don't want to be found to be behaving outside the mandate that we have been given. So we have not allowed anyone to control us. Like I said, whether it's government, whether it's donors, we have a mandate to deliver. And I think so far we're doing quite well.
Now we are officially in the political season. Some call it the silly season, but I choose to call it the political season.
Yes.
How does your mandate change during this period?
It doesn't change. Maybe it's accentuated, but certainly it doesn't change. The mandate remains. Our media must be professional. Our media must serve the interests of Zimbabweans. Our media must give fair, balanced coverage. Our media must be a source of information to enable our citizens to make decisions. So even during elections, it becomes more pronounced, yes, because then Zimbabwe is deciding who is going to govern, who the representatives are, and so on and so forth. But the mandate remains to say, as we go into elections, what are those things that we should be wary of? What are those things that we should ensure that as the fourth estate we avoid? What are the things that we should promote? And I said earlier on, it's about professionalism. It's about objective, fair reportage, which enables Zimbabweans to make informed choices. That is the bottom line. So the mandate doesn't change. It becomes more
pronounced.
More pronounced, yes, but it remains.
You mentioned that part of your mandate includes ensuring that there is fair and balanced coverage or reportage. On a scale of 10, how would you rate the local media in this aspect?
That's a very difficult one. I think it's work in progress. I would say that it's work in progress. And I'll also say that the work that we've been doing over the past 4 or 5 months regarding these issues, we're getting a very positive response. We're doing a lot of training. We're doing a lot of sensitization of our media on what is expected of them in these elections, and I'll say that we're getting a very good response. One of our responsibilities around the elections is to produce, through this election monitoring committee, we're expected to produce a report which then speaks to how the media conducted itself during the electoral season. You call it the silly season. So it's about saying how, as the media, how as a sector to contribute to the conduct of the election. The overall judgment of the elections also looks at how the media conducted itself.
Now, Godwin, you mentioned the elections monitoring committee. Can you tell us more about this committee and how it functions?
Okay, so like I said, the media monitoring committee is tripartite, if you want, which is chaired by ZEC. The other members are Zimbabwe Media Commission and the Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe. The responsibility of that committee is to ensure, rather is to monitor the manner in which our media is covering elections. So it could be your broadcasting, your print media, and so on and so forth. The idea is to check that we are meeting minimum standards that are expected of the media during an election.
What elements will you be looking at?
Fairness, objectivity. Are we giving the correct coverage to all players? Are they getting an opportunity to have their voice heard? Obviously, we are looking at issues of equity. Somebody has got 210 MPs, somebody has 20, somebody has 30. How do you fairly balance coverage to ensure that all players get an opportunity to be heard? Because like we said earlier on, Zimbabweans must decide on the basis of information. So the Media Monitoring Committee checks that those minimums are being met, are being fair, being objective. Issues of fake news, are they being catered for, malinformation, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, the issue is citizens must get sufficient quality information.
I would like to believe that the committee in the previous election came up with a report on how the media fared. Maybe you may want to share with us some of the key pointers from your assessment.
Yes, I think the committee did note that there's been a significant improvement in manner in which we are, giving all candidates, all political parties, a fair amount of space. But also there was a feeling that some political parties tended to be excluded, especially the so-called smaller ones, the tiny ones, but they also need a voice. So that's one of the things that we are looking at to see how we can ensure that there is equitable distribution of space and ensure that everybody who needs coverage at least gets some coverage which is fair. Like I said, it can't be equal because the political parties are different.
In size and
some are
stature, of
fielding
course.
more candidates and so on and so forth. So, but even then, there should be some level of fairness.
And equity.
Yes, but
now,
also there have also been issues about, for instance, how are women covered, how are youth covered, and so on and so forth. Sometimes our media tends to be very male-based, excluding certain voices. So it's about also how to expand that space to ensure that all demographics find a way of being covered.
I've had conversations with fellow journalists who have raised issues of accessibility to some of these political parties. Mm-hmm. They're saying they are not accessible enough for them to get a coverage. Have you, as a media commission, engaged political parties and other stakeholders, of course, to ensure that they are more receptive and more accessible by the media?
Yes, certainly. The message that we've been saying is your campaign manifestos and so on and so forth must be accessed by citizens. And the media is probably the best route. So we are saying to them, ensure that you give our media space. But also make sure that they are safe when they cover your rallies.
Yes, that's a very important point.
Exactly.
That we would want to touch on extensively, the safety of journalists.
Safety of journalists. We are saying to them, ensure that journalists are safe, they are protected, they are able to cover stories without any harassment, without any undue influence. Journalists are the voice, or they are the eye of the citizens. So when you block journalists and you stop them from covering rallies properly, you are also affecting the ability of citizens to access your manifestos, the information, your programs, and so on and so forth. So we're basically saying to political parties, let's allow journalists free access. But we're also talking to the police, for instance, and we had very good with discussions to say, please protect journalists when they're at work. They are just doing their jobs. But on the other side, there's a responsibility for the journalists to also behave professionally. Because sometimes people end up targeting you because of the way in which exactly you come there and professionally, you behave in certain ways that people start asking themselves, is this really a journalist? Is this guy professional? Even the stories that you write, there's agenda setting, there's malinformation, there's false news, and so on and so forth. So it's got to be a give and take. Political parties give access. Journalists behave professionally.
Now let's look at this very interesting issue around media regulation. There are some who have been pushing for self-regulation, some are pushing for co-regulation, and of course we know some have pushed for statutory regulation. As a media commission, what's your stance?
Well, it's not our stance. This is the constitutional stance. The Constitution of Zimbabwe says the regulator of media is the Zimbabwe Media Commission. However, the same constitution recognizes co-regulation. So the constitution says the Zimbabwe Media Commission may delegate its regulatory powers to the media. So what we are doing, what we are working on now, is to concretize what exactly media co-regulation means. And the route that is being taken is to say we want to see professionals in the media organizing themselves into associations, which then develop codes of conduct. And it is those codes of conduct that they use to regulate each other, themselves. The ZMC will simply play a supervisory role or an appellant role, where if somebody feels that an association has not served them well, they can then appeal. But the primary regulation rests with the associations themselves. The Constitution also says that these associations must develop their own codes of conduct. If they fail to do so, then ZMC will develop one and give it to them. But clearly, the thrust is let's co-regulate. There's no state regulation, there's no self-regulation, it's co-regulation.
But here I would want to pick your mind as a media scholar. Remove your ZMC jacket. Media self-regulation versus statutory regulation. Which of the two do you think is the best form of media regulation?
I don't think either are ideal, because you don't want to give too much power to either side. State regulation, I think, has been seen, it is untenable in a democratic society, because the state itself has got interest in the way in which
the media operates.
Exactly. So you can't have the state regulating, because the media, remember, is also a monitor of the government, of state institutions.
Which is why we're called the fourth estate anyway.
Exactly. So you can't have the one who is being monitored then regulating, right? On the other hand, you can't leave regulation to the players on their own, because then also they've got their own interests to protect. So you don't want to create boys clubs where people meet and protect themselves. You want to balance that and ensure that there is an institution, which in this case is an independent commission, which co-regulates with the media,
the journalists themselves. Now, interesting. We will continue on that tip after there's a few messages. We are discussing media regulation and ethics here in Zimbabwe. You're watching Fourth Estate. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Mint. I'm Andy Hodges. This is ZTN Prime broadcasting to you.
So when COVID came...
Welcome back. You're watching the Mint live on ZTN Prime. I'm Eben Mabunda.
Welcome back. You are watching Fourth Estate and we are discussing everything media. And our focus today is in the country. And my name is Godwin Piri, the Zimbabwe Media. Now, Godwin, the break we were discussing the regulation. Tied to that is the issue of accreditation. Now, we are in this election and soon journalists who are registered with your commission will need to go accreditation electoral commission, and some journalists feel this too much of a burden on them. What's your take?
The law says must credit, but times appreciate their administrative considerations. Journalists that are credited under, they are credited in order to be access polling stations. Imagine if every journalist ZMC card can access any polling station. Imagine the chaos. Like obviously needs for who is in the polling station, who has come in, observers. Once you enter the station, you become an observer. So they're being treated that way. Otherwise, nothing stops any journalist in Zimbabwe from covering elections. Accessing the polling station is another story. So you can rallies, but anything. By the way, accreditation with us, ZMC, is not compulsory. You are journalists without accreditation. It's just beneficial because some sources will insist that I need. Yes. Okay. So accreditation, practical consideration, has.
But we see a similar scenario when it comes to even sporting events, music concerts. Journalists are to undergo secondary accreditation.
Exactly. Again, I want to explain it for them because see is simply primary accreditation. I'm saying to you, Fraser somewhere.
Is he a tester?
Yeah, he is. You let them see. We have accredited about 4,000 journalists, and all of them pay to a venue. They say because we've got this, we want to access the venue. You have a 6,000 seat. 500 has been taken by the card. So you as the organizer, because remember we are expenses. You want people to pay come in. So allow 4,500 journalists to come in. ZMC has said these are journalists. You remove nothing. So this is why I'm saying that they are
you'll be running a charity.
Exactly.
Now, the whole idea behind media regulation is to ensure that journalists to ethics. I would want to understand the process that journalists that would have ethical requirements.
Yes, so I think this is where regulation is going to say these codes of conduct at a professional. If you are a journalist, have your association and have a code of conduct. So is therefore, as an association doing with this person, I will telling them and that they are paying. You find with lawyers, doctors, with we are saying let's have associations with their members. Then that code of conduct that ZMC will say exactly. But now let us regulate it with association to sort each out.
You also have that breach or code of conduct. How are they going to be dealt with, particularly particular election?
There is a code of conduct under the Act. It provides clear steps on what is done. If you do this, this happens, and so on. It is important for them and ensure that do the right thing. The things that you can't do. You can't announce resistance before you announce them. You can only replay what. So there are lots of things. There are lots of rules and regulations that our journalists familiarize themselves. And it's about contain. It's not about stifling, but it's law and order.
Aspect or characteristic about journalists, they disseminate information. They themselves don't quite read what is doing in terms of is especially as we approach.
Thank you very much. We have launched this. We have launched this manual, election reporting and peace manual, about educating journalists elections. What are elections? How do we hold elections in Zimbabwe? What are the steps? What are different houses that so on and so forth? It's not about elections, but also about how a journalist must issues. Rolling out that we have covered by end of July, 1,000 journalists who definitely are certain to cover elections. So the issue is about ensuring that they're. But I think as a it's your responsibility to also educate yourself. It helps you to do better. It also helps you to stand out because it's getting fairly mature. You can tell a good so it's responsibility also for the community, also to be proactive, go out and knowledge. Now
we have in journalism and online journalism. It's a contentious one. Is the community wish that this area be regulated?
Impact on citizens. There's an impact on and so on. You want some level of regulation, but at the same time, it interfere with human behavior. People gather in social space, talk, to discuss. So you must draw a line between ordinary ordinary discussions that and separate it from content which attempts a genetic approach. That has to be. It has an impact on how people receive information. What information do they receive? It can also influence the way in which they don't want them to be acting on false information, and so on and so forth. So, having said, I think there's still debate how you regulate that space. It's a Zimbabwean issue. It's a global question. There has to be some of regulation areas that maybe we don't have control over, your Facebook and people access information that is quality, that false information, and so on and so forth. But also at the same time, to continue, people talk.
But where do you draw distinction media as a public space, and so as a public space in the sense of the media?
Like I'm saying, it's a very difficult one. But I think what is easier, for instance, is a registered media house. When they go into a social space, they is being a media, follow that kind of journalism. But if you take your and start then come down was posted. I mean, so it's how do you, like I said, genuine, ordinary behavior, journalistic. But like I said, that's a question that answered, and we are releasing a research soon to
answer that issue.
Exactly.
In 30 seconds, help us here draw the line between freedom of expression and freedom of the media.
It's one of the same thing. It's one and the same thing. People are free to express themselves. The media is simply a channel for expression. Therefore, for freedom of expression to happen and to be enjoyed, you need a media that is free to carry information without any hindrances. You need journalists to be able to access information and share it without being hindered. I think the two are mutually inclusive. One supports the other.
On that note, I should thank you very much, Godwin, for joining us here on Fourth Estate. And that's a wrap up from us. You were watching Fourth Estate. Be sure to join us next week, same time, same place. Pleasant viewing.